You're watching Indonesia Highlights. Australia is hosting the B20 International Business Summit as part of the G20 Summit this year. The B20, which gathers businessmen and business groups from around the world, will seek to formulate recommendations and issue commitments from business leaders and business organizations to deal with current issues. Senior editor Bimanto Swastoyo talks about the B20 with Robert Milliner, the B20 Sherpa for Australia.
Hello, I'm Bimanto Swastoyo and you're watching Indonesia Highlights. Today with us we have what I call the B20 Sherpa for Australia, Mr. Robert Milliner. Hello, welcome to Jakarta.
Thank you, great to be here.
Yeah, B20 cannot be separated from the G20. It's held part of the G20 event as well. What is it actually? What does it do? Who are the members?
Right. Well, the B20 has been in existence for the last 5 years, and it was at the request of governments responding to the financial crisis to get a business perspective of some of the things that governments were going to do, particularly around restoring stability of the financial sector.
Reforms.
So it was very much initially about, if we do these reforms to the banks, will that affect business? So that was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Since then, the dialogue has expanded and moved on, and it's very much from a government perspective, recognising that business is a key to actually achieving a number of the outcomes that governments want to achieve, particularly around things like economic growth and jobs.
And do you find that they actually listen to you?
Oh, absolutely. I can give you many instances. I've spent the last 5 or 6 months going around to the G20 countries, talking to business but governments as well. And I've been really interested by how willing governments are to talk to us about their hopes for the G20, what they would like from business and how we can work together. And to give you a more specific example, recently the finance ministers of the G20 met in Sydney, and we had on the evening before they met a round table discussion around infrastructure. It's a very big issue across many countries. How do we get more funding into infrastructure? How do we speed up development of infrastructure? And we had representatives from 15 different countries on the business side, with a similar number of finance ministers and central bank governors having a very detailed exchange about those issues.
And do you find that, for example, we're not actually living in, we're still post-financial crisis mode, for example, and governments are very much troubled and concerned about their the slowing economic growth and things like that. Would that impact you in that sense, or would it give an urgency to people to act or something like that?
I think the key factor is, Benito, is about your point, is that at the moment it's actually brought the G20 together with a very clear focus. So post-2008 the focus was around economic stability. A few years later probably it lost its way a bit, and certainly, I think there's a view both in the business community and the wider community, what's the G20 been doing, what's it achieving. And then post St. Petersburg in September of last year, a clear reality that from both developing economies and developed economies, that economic growth and employment are really key issues. So they're very focused on that. We're very focused on how business can contribute to dealing with those issues.
Australian officials it's been a buzz in the press and things like that, that they want hosting this G20 and of course B20 as well to make some, what did they call it, the practical
actionable
voila. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that in the past, if you go back over the last few years, the outcomes of these meetings, which are called communiques, which explain and summarise what the leaders have said, go on for pages and pages and pages. And they seem to be very general. They seem to be acknowledgements. They don't seem to be specific commitments of, we will do this with this intention. So our government has certainly sponsored a discussion within the G20 about having a clearer, tighter agenda and to being very focused on specific actionable outcomes. That's received a lot of agreement amongst the G20 countries who wanted to get on with things. And from a B20 point of view, we believe that that's what business does well too, is to make specific recommendations that can be implemented. So, you know, for example, in infrastructure, here's a way in which we can get infrastructure built more quickly by you governments agreeing to do this. And that's the type of dialogue that we have going.
And you guys subscribe also to the principle that government should be, as much as possible, off the business sector?
I think our view is that governments are obviously a very important part of our social structure, and that they have an important role to play, as does the private sector. The role of governments is to provide leadership and to create the right environments for business to do what business does well. Invest, grow their business, make profits, employ people. And if that cycle can be repeated in a sustainable way, then you've got the recipe for good economic growth, for growing prosperity amongst countries, which is for the benefit of their communities.
Do you have any focus? I mean, are you going to deal with every field, reforms in every field, or are there specific areas where you want to concentrate? I don't know, maybe investment, trade?
Yes, very much so, because we take the view that perhaps in the past we as business have been a little bit guilty too of trying to put too much on the table of the G20. So we're very focused this year in looking at 4 specific areas that we think are really key to economic growth, and that's around trade, around infrastructure and investment, around the financial regulatory system and what we think are some unintended consequences, and around human capital, which is the jobs issue, not just in the context of current jobs, but potentially future jobs.
Future jobs. But that would also depend on the economy.
Well, it's more than that. What we are looking at there is the fact that there have been a number of studies done that show that technology is going to have a real impact on jobs in the future. Automation is going to affect, according to one study, 50% of all jobs in the next 15 years. Digitisation is radically changing the nature of work. And our concern is that the current framework that governments, businesses, trade unions, education institutions work in doesn't really take into sufficient account that changing dynamic, and that we all need to be working together more clearly to create a better pathway for our younger people in terms of what skills and capabilities they